Well, hello, kids. Welcome to Glenn's Drum Emporium. Yes, today we're going to talk a little bit about drums. Bore the living hell right out of you. A few of you might find this interesting. So if you follow me on my YouTube channel, the Barking Eye Productions site, where everything Glenn music, restorations, car stuff, whatever, I slam on there. I posted videos of me playing these old, vintage, rare Japanese drum sets. They are short form to the term M.I.J, which means made in Japan. They were these mysterious companies that popped up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s like gangbusters. They were everywhere. They were cheaper drums, looked really cool. The finishes were amazing. And basically suckered us all into getting into the drum thing because they look so cool. They were somewhat clones of the big brands like Gretsch, Rogers, Slingerland at the time, but at a price range where we could afford them because most of us couldn't afford the top quality stuff. So anyways, I got into them, believe it or not. I watched a Godzilla movie when I was a kid, and they had a Japanese orchestra playing in this, I shouldn't say orchestra, a band, just a kind of a rock band, but a bit bigger than a rock band. And I saw the drummer playing these drums, and I just took note of them. And it was kind of a thing that I asked myself. I said, well, I watched the Monkees and the Ed Sullivan Show and saw all these drum sets. So just out of the blue, I thought, well, I wonder, these drums. I always thought certain drum companies were associated with a certain country, like drums. This drum set I saw on this show must be American. Oh, this must be a Canadian. Oh, this must be Japanese. So when I saw the Godzilla thing, I started, well, what kind of drums come out of there? And I did that even with their guitars, but because I was fascinated with drums, that's the direction I went. So then I went, my family were musicians. My brother was into music, so he took me down to a local music store, and I wandered through and I saw all these different drum sets, different brands. And at the time, we're talking late 60s, and I believe the store was actually Anthony's Music, where I live. Anyways, there was a drum set in there, and it was one of these Japanese things. It said cornet on it. And so, all the drums looked the same. I was too young to know the difference, but it stuck in my head. This cornet badge was about this big. Anyways, so on my website, I posted, I've owned 100 of these kits, restored them, flipped them, kept some, but I've done videos on them and done like the restoration part of it, but also just the playing factor. And I try and showcase the drums I play without miking the living hell out of the drum set. I basically just use a single camera, try and get the best sound of the drum kit in that particular room on the other side. So I get a lot of questions asked about these M.I.J kits, and there's a misconception that all these drum sets are created equal. They are not. After going through 100 of these kits in my life as a musician, which is going to be pretty much 50 years of being a drummer, these drums are not all created equal. And like I've said on some of these videos, there are some gems in there, in that vast Japanese invasion of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s drum takeover. And I didn't know that until I started ripping these drums apart, restoring them, cleaning them up, that, wow, there's a few in here that are equal quality to some of the manufacturers that were the top companies at the time. What I also noticed is these companies borrowed heavily on the design of the lugs and sometimes the strainer release, and very interesting. So two companies in particular that I have found gems, what's the term, gems in the rough, I guess? I don't know if that's the proper term, but I found a few gems, we'll say. I'm going to talk about two companies, or two of the name brands. So first, we're going to talk about Gracy. Gracy drums, which were originally the Yamamoto Drum Company that started after World War II and lasted until the early 70s. You're going to find some of the lifelines of these drums changed at the early 70s. There's a reason for that. So this Yamamoto Drum Company built drums. Yes, they had the big band thing. They had influences from the U.S. music come in. So orchestras were using them, and these big bands. And yes, the Japanese got into the rock and roll thing. So when it came to the Beatles invasion in the early 60s, this Yamamoto company came up with the Gracy drum line. Now, these are a standout. You can tell a Gracy kit for the most part. The badge is very unique, although the badge changed over the years. Very unique badge. They mimicked, that's a polite way of saying ripped off, Gretsch designed lugs. Their snare releases weren't the normal cheapy throw off that you saw. They kind of had one that mimicked Slingerland's clam style, that kind of wrapped around the side of the drum. Beautiful looking. They did have a similar type, kind of Ludwig-ish. But also, some of the Gracy drum sets had die-cast hoops, which you would have found on Gretsch drums themselves. So this Gracy line, one particular model, heavily borrows off the Gretsch style drum. They even went as far as to coat the inside of the drums in a silver sealant, and that was Gretsch's trademark for many years. Interesting drums. I personally own a Gracy drum set, and it came into my possession purely by accident because these people were actually going to throw it out and heard I restore drums and give them away to kids for Christmas cheer. So they donated the kit to me, I ended up giving them money for it because there was a few other drums that they didn't want to donate but had for sale. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a flat thing for price on all this stuff. So I bought it. Because when I saw the drums, I thought, I got to investigate this because I've never seen this before. I said, I thought it was a Gretsch kit originally, just at a quick glance. So if it's a Gretsch kit, I want to at least give them some money for it. But there was no, that particular kit, it was in bad shape, we'll say. So when I saw the badge and it said Gracy, I go, okay, well, it's not Gretsch, but it looks like it has all Gretsch lugs. I knew nothing about it. So I got the stuff home, ripped it all apart, did the research on it, and started to discover this company, Gracy, or this model called Gracy drums. The particular ones I have are 3 reinforcement hoops in the bass drum shell, which is not uncommon with some of the other M.I.J. Japanese drums. But the bearing edges are like great. When you think of some of these drum companies, they didn't understand that bearing edges made a difference. But some companies, especially Rogers, were focused on bearing edges. They knew that was a sound changer and a quality thing. So Gracy drums definitely had that. The kit I have, it only came with the tom, kick drum, and floor tom, no snare. However, I did acquire a Gracy snare years later, and now that's merged with that kit. And my snare is a metal one, chrome. And very interesting drum. Right now it's in storage, so I can't show you it, but I might have a picture of it I'll post later. My snare doesn't have, or the drum kit does not have, the die-cast hoops though. So I'm in search of a Gracy kit with die-cast hoops. I have photos of one of those kits. Very interesting, very rare bird, we'll say. Sound-wise, I love the snare. The other drums, I like them. They're better than most of the Japanese kits, except for one called Tempo, where I'm going to go next with. So, over the years, most people dismiss these M.I.J. drums as junk, or just not a quality that they would like. And considering the heavy hitters we have in today's market and how drums are made now, could they take the punishment? That would be debatable, depending on the M.I.J. kit that you have. I would say if you had the Gracy kit with the die-cast hoops and stuff, sure, it would handle it, no problem. The kit that I have, I would say snare-wise, it would handle it, no problem. I'm not sure about the hardware to hold the toms and stuff. That would be debatable. So this Gracy company, highly collectible right now. I could see this vibe happening over these Gracy drums because they kind of slipped under the radar. They weren't the normal ones that were being thrown in your face. Like common ones were Apollo, Cornet, like Cornet where I am, was popular. Stewart was another one, but I always found Stewart to be a lesser style than the Cornets. Those two were popular up here. Raven was a really cheap one. And these Tempo ones, There's also 10 Pro. And there is roughly 30 of these what we call stencil kits. 30 names, these stencil kits that seem to have popped up through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it was almost like the company made the drums, and whoever wanted to put their badge on it, put a badge on it. And I assumed the same thing, except the odd ones, when I was restoring them, were way better quality control, way better finishes, heavy duty castings on the lugs, pretty much equal to the big boys, the big names. And I took note of it. So as I started doing these kits, ones that came up like Royal Star, there was a bunch of Star drums. I noticed the quality was different. I even own a Yamaha kit from the late 60s. And one of the first kits, the Black Willow kit, and the quality is great on this kit. Then I found out that these are highly collectible, have quite the value on them, and they were a turning point in the Japanese drum market. A company called Star was producing a lot of these. There was a company we know as Pearl Drums now, world famous, also made these cheaper drums. And by doing all these cheaper drums, it made these big companies a shitload of money. And what they were doing is they were preparing, while they were building the quality of the drums and getting things better, putting out these stencil kits was a way to make a buck. You can definitely see that. But they flooded the market. You could buy these kits, half the price of American-made drums or British-made drums. And they saturated the market, and everybody took to them because those kits are still around today. You can still find them for sale. There's no shortage of them, but it's the quality ones you got to find. And so they flooded the market, and then they planned this strategy. And in the 70s and early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, they came out with top quality drums and basically wiped out some of the biggest names in drums, American and British. So they knew what they were doing, and gradually these cheaper drum sets were their test patterns, test kits, to evolve to what they ended up coming out with in the late 70s and early 80s. I just started playing in 77, and Ludwig and Fibes and Slingerlands were huge. They were everywhere on TV. Rogers. And all of a sudden this big giant wave of Japanese drums came in. Innovative finishes, colors, woods, designs, hardware, different hardware, like the ball mounts Tama came out with. It just slammed. It just slammed any company that wasn't looking. And most of them weren't. They didn't see the competition coming. They just, I think, saw these cheaper drums kind of borrowing heavily on their designs, making inferior kits. But I know now, just from collecting, they were taking those experimental little cheap drum sets and gradually adding things to it, getting better on workmanship. And they wouldn't release it as a line. They were just throwing them out as little test things. So if you got lucky, you picked up one of these. Well, I was lucky enough to pick up 3. So I've got 1 Gracy kit and 2 Tempo kits, where the quality control is excellent for the time in comparison to Ludwig and those other drum companies. So much so that the Tempo kits that I speak of, which seem to, because there's one of the kits has a star brand stamped inside, which later would become Tama. The quality control of the bearing edges and the sound of this kit is phenomenal. It's equal to what they were putting out with Tama. And it's a late 60s kit. And I just happened to come across it, and it's mint. Actually, both my Tempo kits are mint. It's like they are a time capsule, never been played. In fact, this bluer kind of pearlish ripple kit that I have is with the finish on it. It came with 2 original heads on it. Never been hit, so they're cleaned up and still on the kit. So these kits, I've recorded with them. I love them. They're great. I'll never part with them. That's how much I love these kits. And the Gracy kit I'm restoring that right now because it was not a mint kit. Like I said earlier, it's had its day. They didn't know what they had, but I know what it is now. So the finish is fine on it, but it needs thorough cleaning. And the bass drum lugs on it were, the chroming was pitted. It was sitting in a bad place for, I guess, certain years, and so I have found lugs for it. It took a long time, but I have new lugs for it. Not new, but great condition lugs to replace those. So the snare drum is in great shape and sounds great. So the drums themselves the bass drum hoops will be repainted, and the inlays are still good. It's a red sparkle kit, which seems to be the most collected kits out of the Gracies, the red sparkle. For me, I'm more of the ripple and pearl finish lover, but the sparkles are nice. So I will, when that's done, hopefully this summer, I've got many kits I'm restoring right now, including the Fibes kit. When I get those done, I will do a video on the Gracies. I'm looking forward to it. I don't think they're going to sound as good as the Tempo kits. Those Tempo kits, they sound like 60s Ludwig kits. And I have a 60s kit and a WFL kit from the 50s. And they do have a vibe that's very similar. The shell design is built with reinforcing hoops, very similar to the WFL kit, as it has mahogany and maple hoops inside. Very similar design, so, and beautiful sounding. So, what happened to the Gracy company? I am not sure. I am still researching that. See, that Gracy company seemed to have faded the very early 70s. Now, was this company making shells for other companies? Gracy was their flagship. That I know was their flagship line of drums. They made other instruments too, apparently. This Yamamoto company. But they stuck to drums and cash in on the 60s craze with the rock and roll coming in. But were they involved in one of these other drum companies like Pearl and Tama and Yamaha? I am not sure yet. Most of these kits come from those companies. That's pretty much a fact. For them to stand out as their own separate company like this Gracy, I find that interesting, because they didn't seem to explode on the market like they did the Yamaha, Pearl, and Tamas. So I'm still looking into that a little more. So, anyways, so some of the big companies like the Pearl Star and even the Hoshino line. There's another mystery. I own one, two, three or four sets of Hoshino drums. That company started off doing the cheaper drums, and then you could see them evolving. They evolved so much that they put out acrylic kits, beautiful acrylic kits, some very interesting and rare Hoshino acrylic kits out there. No other company was doing. The patterns on the acrylics were corrugated into the acrylic and gave it an interesting effect. No other company was doing that except for Fibes, I believe. Fibes did some interesting ones. But again, multiple colors. Hoshino also put out maple kits with heavy hardware. And like I say, that company's got a mystery to it. So, and it is said to have merged or was part of the Tama Star Company. Again, some loose ends in there. Because I have Hoshino kits that have Tama style hardware on it. So, the mystery continues. The fact is that Star turned into Tama and Pearl was always Pearl. So there's always a mystery with Japanese drums. Because the Saki company is another major player. They used to manufacture shells for Yamaha. Then in recent years they came out with their own lines out of some dispute with Yamaha. So yeah, you think Yamaha's making the drums, but the Saki company excuse me, is making some of their lines of drums, but not all. So I'm not sure where that kind of plays out. And I also heard that Yamaha and Rogers did some combination of things too. So lots of mysteries in the drum world when it comes to the manufacturing. So that's a scoop. That's where we lie. I'm basically going to be working on that Gracy kit. I'm fascinated by these Japanese company drums. I've loved them since I started working on them. Since the day I walked into that store in the 60s with my brother and saw that kit on the floor and saw cornet. And I do own one full kit, but it's not a very good kit. But I do own a few of the snares and love them. I've given a lot of cornet drums away over the years. People have donated them to me and I pass them on to kids. But I'm always looking for mint kits for my collection. So the Gracy kit with the die-cast hoops. I'm going to post pictures of these items with their snare releases and stuff, and of my kits. And I'll put a link in my Facebook page. I'm going to post this on Facebook and YouTube, and I'll put the links to the videos of me test driving a few of these kits. But I find them interesting, and yes, I collect the other stuff too, the name brand stuff, but I got a soft spot in my heart for these Japanese M.I.J. kits. So, and I've been pleasantly surprised by a few of these kits, and I've played them for some of my friends and they can't believe the look and the sound. They're shocked, especially the volume of the drums. Some of the volumes are pretty loud. The one tempo kit I have is pretty loud. Okay, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Pictures in with the video coming. Peace.